Hello and welcome to the January 7th edition of the Bubb Report. I am Dr. Kellon Bubb. This week on our program, we remember the late former Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Basdeo Panday, who died after a period of brief illness in Florida. Panday, Hello and welcome to the January 7th edition of the Bubb Report. I am Dr. Kellon Bubb. This week on our program, we remember the late former Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Basdeo Panday, who died after a period of brief illness in Florida. Panday, the first Indian origin Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, is credited with elevating the spiritual Baptist faith in the multicultural nation.
But the religious sect continued to be looked down upon, to be scorned and disrespected. So they began another struggle for recognition and acceptance by the rest of the society. When I became Prime Minister in 1995, we declared March 31st as a public holiday. And not only that, we donated 25 acres of land in a place called Maloney for the establishment of an African spiritual park.
From his humble beginnings in Trinidad's sugar belt, Panday pursued education with determination, evolving into a successful lawyer. His entry into politics in the mid-60s with the Farmers and Workers' Party marked the beginning of a political journey that would see him co-founding 3 political parties in Trinidad and Tobago, the most significant of which was the United National Congress.
Let history record that on this 25th day of November, in the year of our Lord 2000, the spirit of our nation soared to new heights on behalf of and in the interest of the citizens of our republic. I always say that when we Trinis unite, we win. Ladies and gentlemen, 10 years from now, after my 3rd term, after I would have demitted the office of Prime Minister, many of you will perhaps look back and say, my God, what this country would have done if the Panday administration had not stood its ground and built this airport.
Also on the Bubb Report, we dissect and make sense of the first major cabinet reshuffle of the NDC administration that includes the inclusion of Delma Thomas and Quince Britton into the cabinet. Minister with responsibility for sport, Ron Redhead, will no longer sit in the cabinet and explains how he will be using the extra time allotted to him.
I think it was very important. We learned significant lessons and we built a team. And we are still a team. So I want to reiterate that I still remain the Member of Parliament for St. George North East, fully committed, not just to party, but certainly to country, and will still continue to do my part to ensure that we move Grenada forward.
Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell articulated the vision for the new cabinet reshuffle.
It's obviously that all of us, when we entered office in June last 2022, were new to service at this level. It has been a steep learning curve for all of us. Part of this reassignment is an appreciation that we need to continuously learn. There's no such thing as becoming comfortable when you are serving the public, because every day a new challenge emerges that we must confront, that we must diagnose, and that we must be able to serve. So I think it's really an opportunity for all of us to continue to grow, to develop, and to be better at what we do, which is serving the public. I look forward to continuing to work with all of us. I welcome the 2 new members of the team, Senator Quince Britton and MP Delma Thomas. I want to particularly commend Minister Redhead for taking the choice to pursue his education. And as the Minister for Youth and Sports pointed out, if we need youth in agriculture, youth in leadership, we need to ensure that the youth has a strong academic educational background to do so. And I think Minister, well, I'll have to call him former minister now, former minister, but MP Redded is leading by example, and it's an example.
We welcome our guests, Vasant Barath, former Minister of Trade, Industry and Investment in the previous UNC government, Tobias Clement, former leader of the opposition in Grenada, Kenny Lal Singh, former Member of Parliament for St. Patrick West, and Ruggles Ferguson, KC, constitutional attorney. Here is our weekly editorial titled Of Public Access to State Events, the Closed-Door Swearing-In Ceremony. We thank you for joining us. A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and a happy new year to all of you. Now, before we get into the meat of this week's program, I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank all our valued viewers and listeners for continuing to support Grenada's Bubb Report. This program intends to continue to be a beacon of independent journalism in Grenada in a time when people are more interested in retreating into their echo chambers for information. Now for this week's editorial. Now, in Westminster democracies, oaths of allegiances are one of the cornerstones of the democratic process. While I have my own personal reservations with the archaic and colonial tenor of an oath of office that bears allegiance to an unelected white British aristocrat with no cultural ties to Grenada, the activity is in fact the people's business. In Westminster democracies, swearing-in ceremonies have always been public, and in instances where government officials attempted to make the swearing-in ceremony private, it resulted in serious pushback from the Fourth Estate in every country where there is supposed to be a thriving democracy. Now, as far back as 1998, the Press Association in the Solomon Islands condemned the Solomon Islands government for holding a swearing-in ceremony of two new government ministers in secret. Only this year in Nepal, on the 2nd of January 2024 in Nepal, the Nepalese government barred independent journalists from covering the swearing-in ceremony of governors there. In 2022, the Kenyan government barred the media from the swearing-in ceremony of President William Ruto. In every instance, there was a major public outcry and a commitment by these governments to revisit this policy change. In 2013, Mayor Bill de Blasio's private swearing-in ceremony in the city of New York ran into conflict with the New York City Press Corps when they demanded access to the venue. In demanding access to the midnight ceremony, the New York Press Corps said, quote, "There is an important principle at stake here. An independent journalist, as stand-ins for the public, should have access to government leaders as they perform the public's work. This includes historic moments such as the new mayor's first swearing-in ceremony. It is compatible with a democratic society to leave the recording of these events solely. It is compatible, rather, in a democratic society to leave these events solely in the hands of government employees," unquote. That particular position advanced by the New York Press Corps is the position we here at the Bubb Report wishes to advance as well. The vacuous excuses heard in the past week from the government apologists were all erroneous and would have never been advanced if Dr. Keith Mitchell's NNP was in office. But it's the continuation of a cavalier and dismissive tone that apologists have adopted, a tone that contemptuously gaslights and demonizes anyone in this democracy who dares to critique or make passive observations about its performance in office. These supporters need to be reminded that the 10 elected officials who sit in the cabinet of the country are there to do the people's business and are being paid by the people to do so. Some surrogates, once themselves members of the media, now supporters of the NDC, also attempted to defend this development by making the case that swearing-in ceremonies are private affairs and that there is nothing wrong with releasing details of same 24 hours after it would have occurred. Again, I asked, would you be defending the previous NNP administration had Dr. Mitchell adopted this protocol? It is also quite a curiosity, given this administration's penchant for prolific posting and live streaming of their events, that they chose to delay footage and images of this event in the age where likes and views are the staple or the oxygen of engagements with a youthful Grenada. This government never misses a moment to post in real time selfies, on location live streams of government town halls, responding to constituents in Facebook comment sections, posting stories, and in the case of one MP, posting a government bid for tendering on a Facebook page. Now, every government has a right to curate its own image according to its own communication and public relations strategy. But they do not have a right to dictate the terms under which the Fourth Estate should cover state events in the public interest. And the word to the opposition, who is feigning outrage over this development, I suggest you kindly sit this one out, because your party, while in government, did not have a stellar reputation of fostering a free press or advancing freedom of information. In fact, the Freedom of Information Act was never advanced under your administration. At least the current Prime Minister of Grenada, Deacon Mitchell, makes himself available to all media platforms when needed. Now, I can't say the same for most of his ministers, or for that matter, for the current leader of His Majesty's opposition, Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell. But the open door policy is certainly a welcome change from what has obtained in the past. And finally, the Bubb Report takes this opportunity to congratulate Comrade Kenny James, trade unionist Comrade Kenny James, an avid viewer of this program and from its inception, as well as a regular guest, for his appointment as principal of the Grenada Boys Secondary School. Certainly, the Grenada Boys Secondary School would be very happy to have you as their principal. Congratulations, sir. And at this time, I wish to welcome our first guest for this week's installment of the report. He is Mr. Vasant Bharat. He's the former Minister of Trade, Industry, and Finance of the UNC government in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And we are here to pay tribute to a fallen soldier, a fallen Caribbean integrationist, a fallen trade unionist, a fallen political leader, a fallen prime minister. Mr. Bharat, welcome to the program.
It's my pleasure, Dr. Budd. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your program this morning. I want to say a very good morning to all of your viewers in the Eastern Caribbean and throughout the rest of the Caribbean, and I'm sure in many parts of the United States of America.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mr. Bharat, we're here to pay tribute to Mr. Basdeo Panday, who in fact appeared on the Bubb Report in the past. Now, in reflecting on Mr. Panday's leadership, what would you say would be one of his most enduring legacies that the people of Trinidad and Tobago can benefit from?
Well, let me first say, if you don't mind me calling you Kellon, if you
Absolutely, yes.
Let me say at the outset that very few people have the opportunity to work with historical figures of a different era. And I thankfully had that opportunity as a relatively young man to work with Mr. Panday, both in and out of the Parliament. And I had the opportunity to witness firsthand his philosophy, his struggles, and the challenges that he faced growing up, first of all, obviously as a young man, as an academic, as an actor, as a trade unionist, and of course, finally, as a politician. And there were many hurdles in his way, of course, and there were many challenges. But I think if we are to remember Basdeo Panday as the politician, I would say that he was intent on embracing all races in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think most people will recollect and remember him for a person who advocated, a politician who advocated a government of a National Front administration that represented all races in Trinidad and Tobago, not just as window dressing, but actually embracing all of our races on the basis of meritocracy, because he always felt that the only way that Trinidad and Tobago and other multi-ethnic societies can progress is if you have unity of purpose and unity of the races in Trinidad and Tobago in particular. So national unity was, I think, first and foremost what he'll be remembered for. But there were other things he wanted to ensure. And of course, everything follows from national unity. The whole issue of equity and equality, the whole issue of discrimination, social injustice, those all flow from being able to strive for national unity. So I think if I had to put it in a nutshell, it would be he would most be remembered as the political figure who attempted to embrace all of the races of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, those who know Trinidad and Tobago will know that we are a tremendous melting pot of several different races. So I think that is what he will be most remembered for. And in fact, even in his passing, many of the comments that have been made, the positive comments that have been made by all ethnicities across the board. And if you ever, as I did, had the opportunity to go anywhere publicly with Mr. Panday, I think he was probably the most photographed politician, certainly in Trinidad and Tobago. I can't say for the rest of the Caribbean, but certainly in Trinidad and Tobago.
Very down to earth. He's very down to earth prime minister. And you talk about that multicultural approach that he took to governance. One of the things that Mr. Panday said when we interviewed him was that do not refer to him as an Indian prime minister. He took umbrage to that.
And you're right. He always said the only Indian prime minister is the guy who is the prime minister of India currently. And he was right. He was right.
Yeah. Now, in respect of his elevation, and of course, the spiritual Baptist faith is in the spiritual Baptist community in Trinidad and Tobago, in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, have expressed their deep and great admiration for Mr. Panday, because Mr. Panday was able to elevate the spiritual Baptist faith into a place of having their own nationally recognized holiday. And he also allocated parcels of land in central Trinidad and Tobago so that the spiritual Baptist community can have their own cathedral, as it were. That faith has been historically maligned and continues to be discriminated against in the Caribbean. But he was able to, in that spirit of multiculturalism, say that they are also part of the mosaic of Trinidad and Tobago.
Absolutely. I mean, the spiritual Baptist faith was one, as you say, that has been not just maligned, but in Trinidad and Tobago had been marginalized as a faith for so many years. I don't know if many people know, but the person who actually, the midwife who actually delivered Mr. Panday as a baby was a woman of the Baptist faith. So his links to the Baptist faith goes back a long time. But I think more than his links was the fact that he, as I said earlier on, he strove to create a level of equality and equity across the board, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, and so on. So yes, you're quite right. We declared, I think it's May 31st, as a spiritual Baptist day. A parcel of land was given to them. Schools have been built by the Baptists in Trinidad. And today, they have to be thankful for Mr. Panday for not just recognizing their faith, but also ensuring that they have a place of worship and that their children will actually be in a position to continue to understand their faith and continue to be part of it. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now let us talk about Mr. Panday's consistent and perennial call for constitutional reform in Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, Trinidad is a republic, and I believe in the context of the Commonwealth Caribbean, that is a big deal because, and to me, that is a huge leap around questions of constitutional reform as it is. But let us talk about the current structure of the Trinidad and Tobago Constitution that Mr. Panday wanted reformed.
Well, Kellan, I'm not sure if republicanism has given us any step up the ladder in terms of how our politics operates in Trinidad and Tobago. The definition of a republic is where the power of the state lies in the hands of the people. I don't know that, like the rest of the Caribbean, that the people has or have too much say in how our politics operates, or in terms of how equally the pie is shared. I think Mr. Panday's perspective was that the first past the post system created a sense of inequality whereby it marginalized the party and the supporters that lost the election. So you have essentially, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago, where you have almost half and half in terms of the split between the races, the major races, and where you have people generally of Indo-Caribbean background supporting the UNC, and Afro-Caribbeans supporting the People's National Movement. Mm-hmm. Whichever party gets into office, the other side and their supporters feel completely marginalized, and there is some reality to that. So we have to accept that is the situation that we are confronted with. What Mr. Panday felt was that the first past the post system did not adequately reflect either the needs or the views of all of the country, or at least half of the country if the other side is in. And so therefore, he wanted to have a parliament, for example, that reflected the views of farmers, reflected the views of business people, reflected the views of other socially dispossessed and voiceless groups in the country. So that you now have a situation where you have a confluence of different views in the country that ultimately will lead to better outcomes for the majority of the people in the country. And I think that was, and I had the deep honor and privilege to have accompanied Mr. Panday when the former Prime Minister Manning invited the opposition to meet with him in 2009 to discuss the issues of constitutional reform and the issues of crime. And Mr. Manning attended with then Attorney General John Jeremy, and I attended with Mr. Panday to try to see how, as leaders, we could formulate a better future for our country rather than winner takes all.
Mm-hmm. And you brought up Mr. Manning there. That was his sparring partner in respect. And Mr. Panday always said he has no enemies in politics. He only has opponents. And that worthy opponent of his, incidentally, they both attended the Presentation College, I believe, San Fernando. Yes.
Correct.
But
yes.
Yes, absolutely. But let us talk about Mr. Panday's foray into politics. But before that, he was a trade union activist representing the indentured workers, the sugar workers in central Trinidad. Talk to us about the significance of his trade union activism in that space.
And Kellan, just before I speak about that, I just wanted
Yes.
to say I had the opportunity to sit in our parliament when Mr. Manning was Prime Minister. And he was a true gentleman. I really have to tell you that. And, it was a different level of discourse in the parliament during that time to what, unfortunately, it has descended into this time or where we are today. Yes, of course, we opposed each other on many different issues. Yes, of course, we are part of the Westminster system that you talked about earlier on, which is necessarily combative in nature. But the level of discourse was very civil. And regardless of what went on in the Parliament chamber, you could always leave that chamber and still have a handshake and still have a hug and still have friendly discourse. And in fact, still invite members of the opposition or the other side to your home for a drink or on special occasions, Christmas, Diwali, and so on. It was a different time. And I think that I think our society is poorer for the fact that people like Mr. Manning and Mr. Panday are no longer with us and leading the way by example. So I just wanted to put that, I just wanted to say that because I think it's important as exemplars in society that we as leaders set the right example, set the right tone, because we are looked at by people, whether subconsciously or not, we are looked at by young people as the people who they aspire to be. And if we behave in a certain manner, particularly in the parliament, then they will aspire, they will feel that there's nothing wrong with them behaving in the way that they're behaving on the streets and in the schools.
And leading by example, indeed.
Yeah.
We're having some technical issues there, but we'll get through it. Let us talk about Mr. Panday's legacy in the context of the United National Congress. Now, I know you actually contested the political leadership of the United National Congress, and I suspect that you and Mr. Panday have the same perspective in respect of the quality of leadership that currently obtains within that political organization.
Yeah.
So talk to us about.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm very fortunate that I met Mr. Panday at a different time in his life, where I was living in the UK. I was European general manager of a company called Thomas Cook, then the largest travel company in the world. And Mr. Panday spent about 5 years trying to persuade me to come back to Trinidad and Tobago and get involved in the political arena. And it actually took him 5 years to get me to say, look, okay, I'm willing to give up what I have and my corporate career to come back and get involved in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. But having come back at a relatively late stage in my life and having spent many years abroad, I appreciated Mr. Panday's perspective that the only way that this country can progress is if, as races, we stop fighting each other and that party politics was based purely on race and not on policies and philosophies. Because you would know, Kellan, that as a young child, if you went to school as a kindergarten age and you were thrown amongst other children of different races, you saw no difference. You played with other children. I played with other children. There was no issues of race or religion or anything else. But ultimately, as we get older, these things are now inculcated in us. We have to take a side. We have to join the tribe. And ultimately, there is peer pressure, particularly by politicians, to ensure that they keep people separated. Because if they can't divide you based on race, then they divide you by class, then they divide you by 1% and 99%. Then as I've been called a knife and fork Indian by the Indians in the party. But so there's always a way that politicians find to divide us. And I will say, if you attend a national event in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, if we have Trinidad and Tobago playing at the stadium for a football game against the USA or anybody else, and anybody comes into Trinidad and Tobago and they see how the races react and embrace each other, and they're eating out of the same pot and drinking out of the same bottle, you would never think it's the same people who at election time wants to kill each other. And it's our politicians who create that divide amongst us, because ultimately there is no political philosophy that divides them, other that separates them, that they can come up with that benefits the people of Trinidad and Tobago, other than the issue of race. So I subscribe to Mr. Panday's philosophy that unless we can embrace everyone, unless we can unite this country based on a common philosophy of who we are and what our vision for our country is and where we want our young people to be in 10 and 15 and 20 years' time, and we want them to be in Trinidad and Tobago, contributing to the development of Trinidad and Tobago and not developing other countries across the world, because opportunities abound in other places and they see other places as greener pastures, then the only way we can progress is to create an environment that keeps them here, that creates an environment that wants them to come back if they're already abroad. So, and the only way we can do that is to ensure that there's a truly an equal opportunities for all, and that we ensure that the era of racial politics is banished forever from Trinidad and Tobago. And if for me, if there's one legacy I would like to try to fulfill for Mr. Panday, it's that.
Mm-hmm. As David Rudder says, how Trinidadians vote is not how they party.
Right, correct. Yes.
And that is such an apt metaphor for what you just articulated. Now, in respect of the future of the United National Congress, would you see Mr. Panday's death as a critical inflection point for a coalescing of some of the forces that have sort of deviated away from its current leadership?
That depends on the leadership of the party and the maturity of the leadership of the party. Okay. Unfortunately, the party has moved so far away from its original moorings, where it has become, I would say, ultimately a cult. And I've said this on many public forums. The party has become a cult. The party is essentially the plaything of one person, which is the political leader. Those people who are members of parliament currently, the majority of them, they are basically just blind loyalists. They don't have any other options in life if they were to leave politics tomorrow morning. None of them can get a job. And so therefore, their sole intentions of staying alive and earning a living is to actually support a political leader who has lost every single election, every single national election, whether it is local government elections, by-elections, national elections, every election since 2011, and I think it's about 14 altogether, has lost every single one, but refuses, in the true traditional Westminster style, which it's often convenient to quote when necessary, but when it comes to acting on it, has refused to move aside, but unfortunately controls the electoral mechanism within the party, and so therefore will continue to stay on as political leader. To the detriment, I must say, to the detriment not just of the membership of the UNC, but also I think to the detriment of the entire population, because I think a strong opposition is absolutely necessary in every country, or in all, particularly in small third world developing countries. A strong opposition with strong institutions are absolutely necessary.
Mr. Barrett, a cult, those are very strong words. I've never heard a political party in the Caribbean referred to in such stark terms.
Well, then you probably haven't been following the trials and tribulations of the United National Congress in the last 10 years or so. It really is a cult. It's all about one person, which is the leader.
And that's about Mrs. Kamala Persad Bissessar, which, by the way, she was very effusive in praise to the founder of the party. That's Mr. Panday himself. Now, Mr. Panday was one of those people, Mr. Barrett, who anytime he spoke about legacy, in his appearance on the Bubb Report, when he spoke about, when we asked him, how he would want to be remembered, he sort of shied away from it. He didn't want to bring up the question. But let us talk about a lasting and enduring legacy. Now, what happens when deceased people, when deceased public servants in the Caribbean die? There is a tendency to perhaps name a school after them. Of course, the Shiva Boys school has been named after Mr. Panday. That's a Hindu school that's been named after him. But how do you think Mr. Panday, in retrospect, would want to be remembered?
Well, of course, Mr. Panday, like Dr. Williams, had said in both their times that they didn't want any memorials in their name. But I think we as a population of every country, it is for us to determine how we not just remember them, but how we want to recognize their efforts and their sacrifices and the challenges that they faced, and how we want future generations to remember them. Now, if their wishes were acceded to, as is the case in many countries across the world, you have the Maurice Bishop Airport, and many countries across the Caribbean have airports named after them. Chedi Jagan, Barbados, Grantley Adams, and many across the Caribbean have
George Charles and St. Lucia,
Charles, and so on. Yeah, not just Caribbean countries. The United States of America, JFK and Bill Clinton and Gerald Ford and so on. In India, you have Rajiv Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, and across the world, you have Charles de Gaulle in France and so on, right? And it serves as a reminder for people because, and I want to say this, and I said it on another platform, in Trinidad in particular, people are what we call have a 7-day memory. We forget things very quickly. We can be very fickle-minded, the majority of the population. And our history that we are taught at schools is not generally Caribbean history. It is British history and so on. And so therefore, there isn't really that opportunity for our future generations to try to have inculcated in their learnings who Basdeo Panday was, or who Eric Williams was, or who Patrick Manning was, or who George Chambers was, or who, look, I'll give you an example. Recently, you may know the name Hazley Crawford, the first gold medalist at Trinidad and Tobago.
The Olympics.
Although we have a stadium named after him in Trinidad and Tobago, unfortunately, maybe about a month ago, he had cause to make a public comment that he was denied entry with his guests at a recent public function.
I heard, I saw that, yeah.
Now, how can that possibly happen to a national icon, a national hero? It is simply because we as a people have not taken the time to try to understand what these people mean to us, what they've done for us, right? And we don't have an appreciation. So whoever turned them away, whether it's the security, I'm not blaming the government for this, of course, but whether it's the security officer, or whether it's the protocol officer, whether it's the bureaucracy, the point I'm making is that we don't sufficiently understand the impact that these people have had on the full development of Trinidad and Tobago. And so therefore I feel that regardless of the controversies that surround the Piarco International Airport, and it's widely recorded what those issues are, I believe that the Piarco International Airport should be renamed the Basdeo Panday International Airport in recognition of all of the work that Mr. Panday has done, not just at the political level, but throughout his career as a trade unionist and as a true fighter for and champion for the working class of Trinidad and Tobago.
And you preempted my question there around the Piarco International Airport, because, of course, as we know, there were some issues there in respect of public accountability that the current PNM administration seized on, sort of on an anti-corruption campaign messaging. But I have on the screen here, sir, a petition that you have mounted, and that petition calls for the renaming of the Piarco International Airport to Basdeo Panday International Airport. Of course, the Piarco International Airport, Mr. Panday dubbed it as the Millennium Project for Trinidad and Tobago, and as a jump-off point for a great economic development in the country. Talk to us about this petition and what you hope to accomplish with it.
Simply, Callum, as I mentioned, I want something that will recognize Mr. Panday, and I accept and I appreciate that there are controversies around the Piarco International Airport. Mr. Panday was charged in a matter relating to this, and then those charges were subsequently dropped. And I also know that there are two people, there are two business people in Trinidad and Tobago who are also going through the courts with regard to this matter. But that is besides the point. The point is that Mr. Panday built a state-of-the-art airport in Trinidad and Tobago that thousands of people either leave or come through or return or visit our shores through. And I feel that it is apt recognition for his, what he's fought for all of these years, that everyone entering and everyone leaving will remember the name Basdeo Panday. And I just feel it in years to come, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, there may be people who do not know Basdeo Panday. There may be foreigners coming into the country, and they will see the Basdeo Panday International Airport, and they may ask, who is Basdeo Panday? And then they will hear the story of who Basdeo Panday was and what he stood for in Trinidad and Tobago. And I just feel that these are the ways that we must recognize, in the same way that Eric Williams has been, who in the same vein did not want any memorials in his name, public memorials. Yeah. He has the Eric Williams Medical Center, which is the major hospital in Trinidad named after him. He has the Eric Williams Plaza in Port of Spain, named after him, which encompasses the government campus, including Ministry of Finance and the and Customs and Excise and so on, Board of Inland Revenue. So I feel it's a fitting tribute that Mr. Panday should be honored by renaming the Piarco International Airport the Basdeo Panday International Airport.
Mr. Barrett, two final questions, sir. One has to do with, of course, the dynamics in Tobago, as we know that the People's National Movement suffered a humiliating defeat in the last THA elections. In fact, it was a landslide that some political analysts were not expecting. Now, of course, the THA, they have their own growing pains in respect of Mr. Watson Duke, what happened there and all of that. But looking forward to the next general elections, would the dynamics in Tobago, the political dynamics in the ground on Tobago, would that affect the PNM's ability to regain the government in the next elections?
Well, clearly a lot depends on what happens in Trinidad, because remember, 39 of those seats reside in Trinidad out of the 41. Yes. So it really it depends. So, for example, in 2010, although there was a coming together of 5 parties, including the Tobago Party, that got involved in an amalgamation and a coalition, the 2 seats in Tobago really didn't matter in 2010 because it was a 29-12 outcome in the elections. I personally believe that the 2025 election will be a lot closer, clearly. But I think the PNM is still in pole position to win, given the weakness of the opposition. The opposition's perspective in Trinidad and Tobago, unfortunately, has been, let's not do any work. Let's just hope that people will suffer enough under the hands of the PNM and they will basically hold their noses and vote for us. I don't think that's the case. The other issue is whether the current administration, the Farley Augustine administration in Tobago, will be prepared to risk supporting or getting involved with the current UNC. and until and unless I think things change dramatically with the United National Congress and its leadership and their perspectives and their work ethic and so on, I think it's highly unlikely that the current THA regime will want to be involved in any way with the UNC. So I think it's important, obviously, that the two Tobago seats are very important. They can actually hold the balance of power in a very tight election. When you said the PNM suffered a humiliating defeat, I think that's an understatement. No one could have ever expected that.
No one expected that. I mean,
including me. I was shocked. But it just goes to show you the sentiment and the emotion that elections evoke. And but I think that there have been some issues, and the PNM really is generally seen as the default party, both in Trinidad and in Tobago. And they've just got to get their house in order to claw back, I would think, some support or a significant amount of support in Tobago. But as I say, I just feel, Kellon, that our politics, both in Trinidad and Tobago, well, of course, in Tobago it's not race-based, but our politics in Trinidad and Tobago isn't really serving the population in the way it should. I think service delivery is poor. And I think ultimately it is because we don't have a system whereby we can hold our politicians accountable for what they're doing. We've talked about reform as we started up the program, and that reform would include recall of politicians if they're not performing. It would, and there would be many checks and balances one would expect. And unfortunately, we've descended into an abyss, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of delivery of services and goods to the population. And the population almost feel a sense of helplessness and hopelessness because they're unfortunately not able to do anything about it.
Mr. Barrett, what about your future? I was in my background research on you, sir, and of course I follow the news in Trinidad closely, our closest neighbor there to the south. Some have said, and you've denied it, that you plan to form another party. Are you going to contest the UNC internal elections when that time comes around again? Notwithstanding that you've called, of course, many UNC rank and file would be offended by your comments that they're a cult. So how do you intend to, what would be your role in the grand scheme of things in respect of the future of the United National Congress?
So my criticism is not of the membership of the party. My criticism is of the leadership of the party and the manner in which the leadership goes about its business in engaging the population at large. First of all, of course, its membership. So, for example, there are no party groups in existence. There are no legitimate constituency executives in existence. All of the councillors that we have in Trinidad and Tobago that fall under the banner of the United National Congress are all hand-selected by the political leader or a couple of her cronies who sit around her. So they're not really democratically elected or selected in the first place. And there's a reason for that. It is because then the political leader, when an internal election comes around, can pick up the phone and say, right, I need you to bring 1,000 people or 500 people. Your job depends on it, essentially. And that is how she's been able to maintain a hold on the party. But the party is what we call in Trinidad a pickup side. It is when the election bell is rung, it is expected that because you look a certain way and you don't have too many kinks in your hair, that you will certainly you will join the bandwagon and vote for the UNC against the enemy, in inverted commas, the PNM and the African people. And I feel that I think for the younger people in Trinidad and Tobago, that kind of politics means nothing for them. And in fact, you will find that a lot of young people in Trinidad and Tobago are completely apathetic to politics across the board because they feel it does nothing for them. They believe truly, and this is a fact that they face on a daily basis, there are no jobs for young people. You come out of university with varying degrees, and there are no jobs to take up. Many young people are looking to leave Trinidad and Tobago because of the crime situation. Many times, if you don't have money in your pockets and you can't afford private health care, and you have a serious illness, you will die in Trinidad and Tobago. So many young people don't see, a future for them here, and it's because of the politics we have. So I believe that like Mr. Panday, I'm here to stay. I want to see a better country. I don't want to know that, yes, because I'm privileged that I can leave at any given time, and or I have a job I can go to, that I can just be comfortable and complacent. Because ultimately what will happen, and what is happening, is those who have to continue to hide behind bars. They have to have security 24 hours a day. They're not sure if when their children go out at night, they'll come back, safely. So we are even though there may be some people who have more than others, they have to be afraid to have it because they can't enjoy it because of the environment that we are creating. People talk about crime all the time, but we are not really looking at the underlying reasons for crime. We have thousands of young people coming out of school every year without any subjects, without any qualifications, without the ability to have a technical skill or vocation. What are they going to do? What are people who have lost their jobs because hundreds of businesses have closed down over the last 6 or 7 years? What are they going to do when it comes to putting food on the table or sending their children to school? Because we're doing nothing to create opportunities for people to be productively employed. And so therefore, I believe that if we are going to have a nation that we can be proud of, that we have to start building it from now. We have to forget what's happened in the past. We mustn't, of course, forget our history, but we have to put that aside and look at what's best for our country, our people. Where are the job opportunities going to come from in the next 5 years? Are we preparing our young children through the education system for that? No. Or what about, artificial intelligence? What about cybersecurity? What about, content creation? What about all of those things that will be on the job horizon in the next 5 to 10 years? Are we still preparing our children with memory learning and, learning the alphabet, not the times tables, and we're not preparing our citizenry for a better future. And I believe that the only way we can do that, unfortunately, is through the political arena. And so therefore, I have every intentions of making an intervention and staying involved. The one thing that the political leadership of the UNC would hope for and would like nothing more is if I were to bow out of politics tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm going off to resume my corporate career and you guys get on with it. That's the one thing that they're hopeful for. But I promise you, that's not going to happen.
Okay, let's see here. Oh boy. Okay, all right, let's see. Absolutely, Mr. Bad. I do apologize there. We had some technical issue, but certainly we want to thank you for appearing on the Bubb Report this week, sir.
It's my pleasure, Kellon, and I hope we can keep in touch and keep an eye on what's happening in Trinidad politics. I think it's going to be a rocky road, but in the first instance, but hopefully we'll get there. With observance of Mr. Panday's legacy and what he stood for. I think that, as you said at the start, this could well be his death, unfortunately, could be an inflection point. And maybe in his death, what we might actually achieve is what he wanted in life, which was a coming together of our nation. Yes. You're brutally honest and brutally frank in the way that you you articulated those views. And just before you go, let's just get some of our viewer comments. Mr. Brown Grimes, a regular viewer of ours, he's also a trade unionist in Grenada. He's saying he basically said, that's you, he will challenge Kamala without saying it.
We have Wendy Hestick, another viewer. She's saying there is one human race. Those under the human race are ethnic groups. The problem of unity is not only the remnant of British colonialism, but also transplanted caste system designation by others. Yulene Alexander is saying this gentleman is hitting the nail straight on the head. Another viewer is saying Panday may not be the best TNT prime minister, and of course that's debatable, but he did what he had to do during his time in office, and it was also less crime during that time. Of course, we did not even touch that. But during Mr. Panday's reign, and the irony is so significant here, because Mr. Panday transitioned at a time when crime is perhaps at its highest in Trinidad and Tobago. But when he served as prime minister, crime was at its lowest. And the data bears that out as well. Let's get another viewer. Mr. Grant is asking, will Mr. Basdeo Panday be counted as a Trinidadian national hero? I think his legacy is sufficiently replete. Mr. Barrett, how does that process work? A national hero designation?
Well, he could be afforded the highest national order. It's called the Order of Merit of Trinidad and Tobago. And it replaced what was called, I think, originally the Trinity Cross. Yes. Of course, although I have to tell you that he did turn down the award under the Mrs. Bissessa's term as Prime Minister, yeah. He did refuse.
And Mr. Manning as well.
Yes. So whether his family will now accept it posthumously on his behalf, we don't know yet. But
all right.
It's and just coming back quickly when we talked about the crime issue, I mentioned that Mr. Panday and I had met with Mr. Manning and then Attorney General to discuss the issue of crime and constitutional reform. But Mr. Panday, in leading by example, actually took on the portfolio of Minister of National Security in those days. So it gives you an example of the man that he understood the problem and he took responsibility for it and led from the front with regard to that issue.
Mr. Barrett, thank you again for appearing on the Bubb Report. My producer is yelling at me here, so I have to get to the next segment. But we are certainly happy to have you again, sir, for analysis in relation to the political landscape in Trinidad and Tobago as an election year draweth nigh in the Twin Island Republic. And we here on the Bubb Report wishes to extend our deepest condolences to the government and people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, and condolences to you as well, sir, on the passing of Mr. Panday. May he rest in peace and may his memory be a blessing. Thank you again.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, Mr. Vassant Barrett, he was a former minister in the United National Congress administration. He also served in the Basdeo Panday cabinet. We are going to take a quick break, and during that break, we are going to leave you with some memories of Mr. Basdeo Panday, the politician, the actor, the statesman, the elder statesman, the community activist, the trade unionist, the father, the grandfather, the overall statesman, and the champion of the people of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Stand by, we will be right back after this.
Did Jack not go on Mulchantes Junction and said that you were so drunk you fall down on Gandhi's statue? That is on record. I didn't say that, Kamala. Jack said that. Do you have the guts to go and say that Jack said that about you? I knoweth not the man. I knoweth not the man, and in case you did not hear me, I say, I knoweth not the man. Well, Patrick Manning, I say as unto thee, thou liest. Suraj Rambachan, a fraud of the highest order. I don't know if when that fella saying them little cat hunting, he mouth don't tie up. You know, when you said that, you said, I thought you said, crapo de tutti crappy. But that if you see me and a lion fighting, feel sorry for the lion or the lioness. Suppose he has a forceful character like me. Is that evidence of a disposition that warrants a label of misconduct? Would you like to sit? Would you like to meet to discuss this bill? I will risk another meeting with you. No,
it will be my extreme pleasure.
Hey,
Because I'm locked down, I can go more.
right. Have you written any memoirs? Are there any books in the works?
Yes, I'm in the process of doing an autobiography.
Okay, all right. And well, whenever that book is released, you're certainly welcome to return to the Bubb Report.
As a matter of fact, I'm hoping that it be published after my death, having regard to some of the things I intend to say in it.
if someone should have a love child, why are you leaving the moment I said that?
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. And I'm happy to be joined by a stellar and esteemed panelists of retired but still ongoing public servants of the state of Grenada, and I believe offering analysis in respect of matters of state also serves as a function of public service. So we're happy to be joined by Mr. Tobias Clement, who is Grenada's former leader of, at the time, Her Majesty's Opposition, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, who is a constitutional attorney, as well as Mr. Kenny Lausing, who served in previous administrations in Grenada and who was the subject of several cabinet reshuffles in the past. But before I get to Mr. Clement and Mr. Lausing, I want to begin with you, Ruggles. Of course, there was a bit of a dust up this week, shall we say. The government rendered private the swearing-in ceremony, not releasing images. They did not even release video footage of the swearing-in ceremony, even though we were told that the Government Information Service is there. Usually when the Government Information Service shows up to any state event, normally that state event is sometimes live streamed. We are yet to see a live stream of this event. Now, Ruggles, I brought you here in your capacity as a constitutional attorney. Now, first and foremost, let us talk about the swearing in or the oath of office that public officials take. It's just not merely a formality, is it? I'm not too sure, Ruggles, can you hear me? I don't think Ruggles can hear me. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes, go ahead, Ruggles.
good morning, Kellon, and good morning, all. I'm
Yes,
not hearing you very clearly. In case you are hearing me, I'm not too sure
I am hearing you. I
whether
am
you are
hearing you.
hearing me,
Yes.
but you are breaking up a bit. I'm not too sure if it's at my end or your end.
It might be on your
Are
end
you
because I think
hearing me?
yes, I can hear you. So go ahead. Yes. Yes, so it
Sorry,
looks like
let
we're
me.
having some technical issues with Ruggles there. So we will get back to Ruggles, but Mr. Lal Singh, I would start with you, sir, in respect of the question that I posed to Mr. Ferguson here, and that has to do with the sacrosanct nature of the oath of office. Talk to me. Talk to us about that, sir.
Good morning,
Yes.
son, and to all your listeners.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be on the program. I will attempt to answer the best way I can any question that is being posed. It is very important that we accept position. We take the oath of office and we do our very best based on the terms and conditions that we have took the oath of office for, that we do our very best in serving our people and our country. And that is a broad answer to the question. Any position that is being offered, you are taking an oath. Too many times we take an oath and we do not perform properly. We do things in our own likeness, but not really performing the duties as were expected based on the oath of office.
Absolutely. Mr. Clemens, same question.
Thank you very much for having me on. Let me
Yes.
say again, Happy New Year to you, to my brethren, Mr. Larsing and Mr. Ferguson, and to all of the United States, everybody in the diaspora, Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. And I listened to the question that you asked Mr. Ruggles there, and then you put it out to the
Yes.
panel. I must say that, okay, I have been through that experience before, but I'm left wondering in terms of how it was done. I do not want to implicate anybody, but then remember, it's a government by the people, for the people, and of the people. And if when you lock out the media, which is the fourth estate, you're locking out the people from what the functioning of government is not a private thing. But I have received my instrument from the Governor General before, and I was just called in. I signed a document, I swear, and there was no big fanfare or anything like that. And so for it to be done in the mood it was done and how it was done and where it was done, I think that is questionable. I mean, you have not yet asked the question about the reshuffle, so I would not go in there yet, but I think there is a lot of questions to be asked as to how and the mood that was under which it was done. I mean, I think you very well know that it's the first time in our country's history in terms of governance that the media was locked out, or even people were locked out, because the day I wanted to know and I could not find out until it was the details were forwarded to me, and so I think we have begun to go down a slippery slope that will not rest well with our people, and it has not rest well with our people, and it will continue not rest well with our people. The manner, sometimes it's not what you do, but how you do what you do.
Ruggles, can you hear me now, sir? I don't think. Are you able to hear me now? No, I don't think you can. So we would continue with the conversation, but let us talk about, and we will get back to Mr. Ferguson once we sort out his internet issues there. Let us talk about the substantive cabinet assignments. Let us talk about the substantive cabinet assignments that have been announced by the Prime Minister in his first major reshuffle. Any surprises? Any surprises? Big picture. Any surprises from you, Mr. Lal Singh?
I don't think there are any surprises, really. I looked at the reshuffle and the assignment of portfolio, and I believe it's a good reshuffle. Now, every leader, every manager have to look carefully at his resource, the development within his government or organization, and from time to time you would make changes. You would see whether somebody better suited for a particular area. And what I noticed carefully from the reshuffle is that he has removed portfolio from a number of ministers. And I think that has made it's a sensible move. In other words, he has given them less responsibilities, because as a minister, as an elected official, even as a senator, you have a job to the constituency. Mm-hmm. So all of these people basically have two jobs. You have to look at representing the people. You also have to look at managing the ministry that you have been appointed for. And you also have to think of winning the next election. You have to think of winning your seat next time. So it's a very broad portfolio. I notice that he has divided, he has reassigned, and overall I believe the cabinet reshuffle didn't have a lot of surprises, but I think it was well done. It means that the Prime Minister would have looked at the performance of his ministers. Some he did not give any more portfolio, some he taken away and realigned. And I believe it's a good reshuffle. Of course, some people would say he has removed Ron, as one of the guys who have lost his portfolio. But from what I heard, there is a decision, and this thing can happen. Some people can have a job and still represent people, like former leader of the opposition, Brother Tobias Clement did. He had a job and he represented the people. This is the first time we have heard and seen someone going to do further studies and can continue to represent the people. Of course, both can be done.
I don't think, no, Mr. Lal Singh, I don't think this is the first time this has happened. I mean, members of the current opposition, Kate Lewis in particular, and Emmeline Payne, they were studying while they were parliamentary representatives and ministers. So the argument that some are making that you need time to do that, the other side would say that, well, that's not the case when we have lived experiences to suggest otherwise.
Well, I'm not quite sure, but if that is the case, I think the main thing for an elected official, the main function is to represent the constituency. If you become elected, you don't have to become a minister. Your duty first and foremost is about representation. If the Prime Minister believes that you are fitted and you can fit in the cabinet, he will provide you with a portfolio. We have had that before when there were 15 seats to one party. There were 3 members who never had any portfolio. So, again, nothing is wrong. But I stand to be corrected that it is not the first time. But I want to re-emphasize, first and foremost, is representation of the constituency. And you are not bound to be
And you're not, and that's the point. You are not obligated to sit in the cabinet. And in speaking to the Minister Redhead's now removal from the cabinet, it's kind of crass to say it that way, but he will no longer be in the cabinet. Again, at the end of the day, none of these ministers, none of these government ministers who sit in the parliament are under any obligation to be in the executive arm of the government. That's not why they were elected. They were elected to serve people first in their constituencies, right, Mr. Clement?
Again, Mr. Dr. Bob, I listened to Mr. Lal sing, and
yes,
probably my jaw almost dropped in that we have to dig deeper than that. I believe that the whole shenanigans of the cabinet reshuffle was, in other words, a means and a way to fire Ron Redhead from the cabinet. I do believe that it is true that in lots of government in the US, in Grenada, you serve in the cabinet at the pleasure of the prime minister or the president. Now, to make this suggestion that he is going to do his master's of study, I mean, how many times this have been run by us, and you look at it, but when you look at it, is it because of the behavior of Ron Redhead in the last 18 months? And I ask the question, are there other people within the ministers whose behavior is probably worse than Ron Redhead? So is it this just the beginning of what we might see as a shifting tide? And I have been analyzing the whole aspect of the cabinet reshuffle and where certain people fit. And maybe Ron did not fit into the upper class that we have seen evolving in the government today, and maybe his efforts did not sit well with others. Ron, he's young, but the last time I listened to him was on his budget presentation. He presented well. Yes, he had made probably a couple errors in moving forward, but then maybe again because of his youthful exuberance. But I ask the question, is it only Ron that has that youthful exuberance or wayward tendencies? And so maybe it's just the beginning of a shift that we have seen. And so in my mind, Dr. Bob, maybe I could be wrong, but seldom so, I believe that Ron was getting rid of. In other words, plain and simple, the man was fired. And so you had to make up the cabinet reshuffle to satisfy and then to say that he's going to study. I am still yet to see that. But I would also make the point, in terms of serving in the government, when you read the Constitution, you would find that you do not need a degree. You do not have to be able to read and write. You have to be a citizen of this country, and in good standing and not in bankruptcy and so forth to run. But it did not ask for any qualification. And it reminded me, and a friend reminded me, that in 1972, Brother Winston White was on his way to go to England to study law, and Sir Eric Machigeri stopped him in his track. And so today, Winston White is not a lawyer because Uncle said to him, Winston, you're going to study the law. I am going to give you an opportunity to write the law. And so here, to say, and I have seen it said over and over again, I am getting out of this range in terms of the politics to go and further my development in terms of study. But you rightly pointed out a few former colleagues of mine did it all together. So I think it's just a big excuse, and time will tell.
But Mr. Clement, you say Mr. Clement, you say it's an excuse. You also neglected. You refused to sit in the cabinet of Grenada as well. You were the member of parliament. Incidentally, both you and Ron are stewards of the constituency, in which the members of the parliament for that constituency are now ministers without portfolio. But that history aside, Mr. Clement, you also did not sit in the cabinet of the country.
But I must stop you there. You said that I refused to. But remember now that
did
you
sit
not? In the cabinet. You sit in the cabinet as the pleasure of the prime minister. It means therefore, if I refuse, the prime minister would have asked me to serve, and I did not. There was never a record that says that he asked me to serve that I did not serve. I mean, I served in the capacity that he wanted me to. He did not at the time wanted me in the cabinet, and so he never asked me. I mean, the truth about it is like this: when a prime minister, a president comes to you under any circumstances to ask you to sit or to serve in cabinet, especially when you're an elected member, you never refuse, and I did not refuse. I mean, there were other mitigating circumstances that would have not.
What were those mitigating circumstances, Mr. Clement?
Not because I had a job doing, and so probably in his wisdom he would have seen that, let Clement do what he's doing, and I serve in the constituency, but I never refused the position of any cabinet minister. So that I just wanted to.
What advice? Yes, absolutely. What advice would you be giving to Mr. Redhead now that he would be in sort of a similar place that you're in? Of course, members of parliament are elected to serve their constituencies first and foremost. And what advice would you be giving him now that he would still have the resources, as he indicated in the press conference, he would still have the resources of state to be able to deliver to his constituents?
Well, the thing about it, yes, you would serve, and I think they have now been given a lot of resources to look after the constituency to some degree. And in my time, although I was not a minister, remember that I think somewhere along the line they sent the check for the remuneration package for the MP at the time was $1,272.71, and I made the effort that should be changed. But recently I hear some people are glad about the change and they were calling for the change. Now, Mr.
And of course, I'm sure you feel vindicated about that too.
Well, it was blatant, and I think that was something that I would say good that the government did. But you see, now we have to be careful, and I would put out a clarion call to those people who are ministers and those people who hold those portfolios in the way that they treat Ron Redhead. I believe Ron Redhead should be treated with respect by his peers among equal and by the surrogates of the prime minister, whosoever they may be, because there are sometimes when you are not given a ministerial portfolio, people tend to almost want to disrespect you, and in some cases disrespect you, blatant disrespect. And so I believe that the young man should be treated with respect in moving forward, and that he should hold up his head at whatever the end of the bargain is and continue to serve the people of St. George's Northeast. And, I say, here we go again, St. George's Northeast, almost in the same position. And it has, because I have been there before, I say that he should be treated well, and he should be treated with respect by all and sons.
Is that based on past experiences of yours that you felt as if being out of the cabinet you were not treated with respect by your former NNP colleagues?
In some instances, you are there when cabinet decisions are made, and if you're not there, sometimes your constituency is decisions are made about some constituency, and they tend to forget that there is a constituency called St. George's Northeast or St. David's or wherever. And so decisions are made and that might affect your constituency, and whosoever is making it, whether it's the cabinet, and when cabinet makes a decision, it makes a decision, but did they consult with the MP for that particular constituency when such decisions were made. And so they have to be very careful about that. And the way that they interact with the young man also, the way that they interacted with me, and some people that serve as surrogates of the prime minister may think now that, okay, Ron Redhead is lesser, and they might want to treat with him in a lesser means and disrespect him. And so all that will and should not come to play. And I'm just, to the powers that be, they say tread softly in that respect.
Tread soft, but I'm sure perhaps if offered, if asked, I'm sure you would give Mr. Redhead some advice there. You've gone to bat for on his behalf here, but stick a pin there. I want to get Ruggles in respect of the Mr. Ferguson. Happy New Year, sir.
Yes, Happy New Year to you, and sorry for that technical glitch. I have gone on a different platform, so hopefully this will help.
The internet. This is much better, sir. This is much better. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So
okay, could you
the earlier question? Yeah, I would repeat the question. The initial question. The initial question was, in respect of the oaths and affirmation of office taken by public officials. Last week in St. George's, the government of Grenada held a swearing-in ceremony. In my experience working in media, I have never recalled an occasion when the swearing-in ceremony was deemed a private event, really, because they only published images and announcements of the event 24 hours after. Media was not allowed to enter the Governor General's residence for any photo opportunities, video opportunities to interview members of the newly reassigned cabinet of Grenada. In your experience, Mr. Ferguson, as a constitutional attorney, should the swearing-in ceremony be a public event? What does the Constitution say about this?
Well, the Constitution itself does not define those details. What the Constitution mandates, there are actually two forms of oath in the Constitution: oaths or affirmation. Oath is when you swear, affirmation is when you affirm, it has the same effect. But you have the oath of allegiance, and that's when you bear full allegiance to His Majesty, his successors, when you're about to take up a particular position. And then you have the oath of office. Now, so the Constitution speaks to the occasions when you have to, in order to enter upon the duties of that office, you must swear either the oath of allegiance or the oath of office. So it would not be complete without that final act being administered by the Governor General. So even the Governor General herself will have to enter an oath of allegiance, an oath of office. You have the supervisor of elections, you have members of the Public Service Commission, you have members of Parliament. When they are being sworn in, you have to give all members of Parliament, whether the Senate or the House of Representatives, you must have the oath of allegiance. And then all ministers of government, pursuant, I believe, Section 40 of the Constitution, all ministers of government or parliamentary secretaries must enter an oath take the oath of office. That's when you swear to uphold the office, do your job without fear or favor, uphold the Constitution. That's the oath of office. So it would not be complete without that final act. Having said that, there is a distinction between the office of Governor General and the office of Prime Minister. Now, the Constitution itself speaks to Her Majesty, well, in this case, His Majesty, being the executive authority over Grenada. But we all know, given our constitutions, that the real executive authority lies with cabinet. Notwithstanding, the Governor General, who is a representative of His Majesty, has a specific role to play in that process. So, for example, the Prime Minister, as head of cabinet, ultimately makes a determination, whether collectively with the cabinet or on his own, to reshuffle cabinet. And you have the reassignments, reallocations of ministerial portfolios. Now, that cannot be complete without the, as we refer to it, the swearing-in ceremony. But the swearing-in ceremony takes place at the Governor General's residence. And it's really a simple ceremony. It's one where the Governor General administers the oath, or the new minister affirms, and you sign the requisite document. It's actually without any additional gloss or so. It's really a 1 minute, 2 minute ceremony.
It's a mundane formality that we've seen for years. Absolutely.
Sorry?
I said it's a mundane formality that we have seen all the time. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a formality. And so I don't know all the details, but I would expect what will happen. Of course, it's important that the public knows, and the media has an important role to play as far as knowing what is happening at the level of the ministers, if there are reassignments to ministries and so. What, however, I suppose is a debatable issue, and it's a matter for the press how they view it. But what you would more likely than not want to know is why. For example, why a reassignment? Why a particular individual gets a reassignment? Is that individual competent to do it? And so, and but that will come out when you have the opportunity, and you must have the opportunity to ask the questions. So the what happens at the Governor General's residence? And I can't speak with authority. I have had occasion to be present for certain very formal activities. You go, you do it, and you leave, basically. There might be a photo up there and then. But what I understood, and I saw clippings of it, that there was a press conference on is it Friday gone, where all the ministers, those affected by the ministerial reassignments, had an opportunity. There was an opportunity to meet the press. So I'm not too sure what went on, if there was an invitation extended to the press, and when the press got there, the press was denied entry. But what I would think would be the key activity would be the activity where you have that opportunity to ask questions and so. Because the oath is really one where you simply, and it's because it's mandated by the Constitution, you must have that formality where you take the oath of office. I can't say what is important or what is not important for the media, but generally, the Governor General is simply performing a function, a critical constitutional function, by the way, but questions cannot be asked of the Governor General in relation to those reassignments. Questions may be asked of the minister, new minister who takes up the his or her duties with the ministerial portfolio. But the Governor General is simply conducting an exercise that is important, is an important constitutional exercise, and that is, in the case of ministers or parliamentary secretaries, administering the oath of office.
Absolutely. Ruggles,
So
thank you for that explanation.
Sorry?
Yeah, I said your explanation was very thorough. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so I can't comment authoritatively on, because
Yeah.
what I do know is that there was an issue with the press. I missed some of your earlier interactions with other panelists, but I'm not too sure what was the problem or issue. But I would think that the major issue at the end of the day will be having the opportunity to ask questions about all these changes that have taken place, why the changes have taken place, whether the people reassigned are the competent people, whether they are the best people in their particular areas. And I think what it really gives us the opportunity, Kelon, is to really understand the distinction between the role of the office of the Governor General and the role of the office of Prime Minister, or the role of the office of Cabinet, and how the two interrelates with each other, and what is the Governor General's role when there are new ministerial portfolios assigned.
But the Governor General does not act, save and except if he or she is acting on the advice of the Prime Minister.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. So when the Prime Minister, so when the Prime Minister said that he had nothing to do with barring access to the coverage of the swearing-in ceremony, he seems to suggest that the Governor General here made this unilateral decision.
Well, I saw a clip, I believe it was last night, and what I understood the Prime Minister to be saying is that he has no control over what happens at the Governor General's residence, because remember, the Governor General is the head of state. In protocol, first comes the head of state, and that's because, as Section 57 of our Constitution says, Her Majesty is the executive authority over Grenada, and His Majesty now is represented by the Governor General. So in terms of protocol, you have the Governor General and then you have the Prime Minister. What happens in the office of the Governor General, and that's how I understood it, the Prime Minister has no control over. And if, for example, you may arrange with the Governor General by consent. So, for example, it depends on the form the activity takes. You might want to make it an activity in which everybody is sworn in at the Governor General's office, and arranging with the Governor General, you have like a press conference up there one time, and you do everything up there one time. The press gets to ask questions. What I understood from this particular assignment, what happened is that different people went in on different occasions or different times to be sworn in. Once you are sworn in now, that completes the process of your ministerial appointment. You are armed with the appointment, and what took place after was a press conference. So I don't have all the information intimately to comment. It seems as though there was some dissatisfaction on the part of the Media Workers Association in relation to how it was handled. I can't comment on that. What I can say is that generally the Governor General has control over her office. The Governor General has a critical role to play in the completion of the appointment process in accordance with the mandate of the Constitution, and that is a matter of form, really, how it's arranged after that. So, for example, in this case, as I understood it, there was a press conference in which all the cabinet members were present, and there was opportunity to ask questions and to get clarification on the relevant questions that the press would wish to ask. So what happened in between, I'm really not clear, save and except that there is some issue in relation to it. But what takes place at the Governor General's office is usually a 2-3 minute exercise, if that much. What happens though, and probably I think everybody knows that, when you first come into office, the style now adopted over the last 15, 20 years, that did not happen before. But now, when there is a transition from one government to another, or even a new government, whether it's the same government, you do a big public ceremony for the swearing in of ministers, the new ministers of government. So the first part of it takes place in wherever the Trade Center or the National Stadium, where the Governor General fulfills part of the constitutional mandate by the new representatives, elected representatives of the House, taking the oath of allegiance. You don't take the oath of office yet, because when you elected as a member of parliament, the first thing you do is to take the oath of allegiance. Similarly, when you appointed a senator, then you take the oath of allegiance. If, however, you are both now a elected member of parliament and you are assigned a ministerial portfolio, you then have to take the additional oath of office. Similarly, if you are a senator and you are also being appointed a minister, you then have to take the additional oath of office. So in the early aftermath of elections, that is usually a public ceremony. But every day there are swearing-in ceremonies before the Governor General, when the Prime Minister has to travel, or Minister has to travel, a new Minister has to hold on. Then you have these signing ceremonies taking place all the time, maybe every week. It's just that it's not really, heard about, at least that official part, save and except X is acting as Prime Minister or Y is acting as the new minister. But you have to go through that same process where, and it's really the formality of it, really.
We have a comment here from Margaret Francis. She said, "Thank you, Ruggles Ferguson. And you should know, since one of the many hats you wore in your professional career was the head of the Government Information Service. Ruggles Ferguson, I never knew you were a member of the media fraternity. Why, sir, have you been keeping this from me?"
Yes. Who's that? Margaret? Okay.
Margaret Francis. Yes, I'm sure.
Actually, I was once the secretary of the Media Workers Association a long time ago in another life. Yes, but Margaret is right. You see, for example, let me just these appointments don't relate to just ministers, because the Constitution makes clear who. When you have to go to swearing in order to complete your appointment. So, for example, you might have a situation where a new judge is appointed, a new magistrate is appointed. And what happens is, you might go there for the swearing-in ceremony with your family or some immediate family, not even your whole family, your immediate family, to just do the formal part of the process. So it's important to understand the difference between that formality, the actual formal technical part of getting you to the appointment stage, where you are now effectively the minister over that particular ministry. And then the press ought to have an opportunity, and I don't think there could be any debate about that, to ask you questions. What are your plans? To ask the Prime Minister questions. Well, why move X as opposed to Y? And it seems in this case that it happened. But I mean, what I would say,
but it happened a full 24 hours after, the swearing in. It did not happen on the same day, right? It happened a full 24 hours after. No one is disputing the fact that there was an opportunity presented to the press to ask the newly assigned ministers questions. That's not in contention. What is in contention is the information not being released in real time, whether by way of a live stream, through the government information service feed, or giving media people the opportunity to cover the event for themselves on the day of the actual swearing in, and that's where the bone of contention is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, probably this can be a learning experience, and in the future, the form of it can change, where, for example, the swearing-in ceremony be made live or some public activity. It might, add to the majesty of the occasion. It's a matter for those who, deal with PR and so. But it should not be, because I think the politicians, in particular modern-day politicians, understand the importance of the press, understand the importance of working with the press to get the information out there.
They understand, especially this administration. This administration is very social media savvy. They never miss an opportunity to post things in the moment. But please proceed.
Yes, well, because the media is important, no doubt. The media is important, and it's important not to engage in as little fights as possible with the media, and learn from these experiences, and maybe upgrade what is done on the other occasion. But I think what the opportunity presents itself, because when you spoke to me on it at first, I was wondering again, okay, what exactly do you want out of it? And then, but I recognize the importance to Kellon, because it's important. It's an opportunity to really point out these very fine distinctions in the Constitution and what the Constitution makes provision for. Because if you do not take the oath of allegiance, or like a newly elected member of the House of Representatives, if you do not take the oath of allegiance, then you cannot enter upon the duties of your office. If you don't take the oath of office, in the case of like other offices, Public Service Commission, supervisor of elections, ministers of government, parliamentary secretaries, then you cannot take up the duties of that office. So as small and as insignificant as it may seem, it is a very important step in the constitutional process. And again, the role of the Prime Minister and the role of the Governor General in our Westminster system of government is also an important role and distinction to understand.
Mr. Ferguson, thank you so very much. And it's good to know that you were part of distinguished, as Mr. Lazarus Joseph is derisively saying, old media. But it's good to know that you were part of the distinguished column of old media that we had in Grenada. that we are trying to continue with here. Mr. Ruggles Ferguson.
And I do, probably that's what gives me a good appreciation of the media and the importance of the media. And again, the reluctance at times for people to say things to the media. But it's an important vehicle of public information and education. And it's something I believe we should embrace and be media friendly. Because sometimes we complain about things being said and don't do anything to clarify the situation and just join the band out there that might be saying, well, or repeating the unfounded criticisms when we have an opportunity to ourselves come out and clarify it. So thank you, Kellon. And I must say, I heard part, though it was breaking up, of your earlier program with Mr. Barrett on Basdeo Panday. And I think the region has lost a giant. Mr. Panday, worked tirelessly for well over 50 years, whether as Prime Minister or leader of the opposition or leader of the trade union movement, working for, advocating for workers' rights, advocating for the marginalized, the dispossessed. And whatever criticisms may be made of him, I think he has earned a great role in history. And we should all salute that. And I really commend you too for your programs, which are not just local, but, highlight a lot of these regional events that we ourselves must know about, especially as we talk about regional integration and one CARICOM region. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I think
I echo those sentiments. Yes, I know George Grant would be proud of me, and George Grant is somebody who I respected greatly and held in great high esteem. So thank you again, Mr. Ferguson, for appearing on this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Yes. Our viewers and listeners, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, but we will continue with the cabinet reshuffle conversation. Mr. Lal Singh, so again, we discussed the big picture in respect of the cabinet reshuffle, but we've had one exit from the cabinet, and we now have one entry into the cabinet. And that is the Member of Parliament for the St. Andrew Northwest constituency. Perhaps one might say that Delma is the luckiest politician in Grenada. Mr. Lansing, what say you?
First of all, before I comment, I want to say that Mr. Ferguson fully explained a lot of the constitutional responsibilities of the Prime Minister, the Governor General, the Executive. And I just wanted to add that it is important that we are friendly to the press. We must be able to answer them honestly, disagree with them if you have to, but the press is very important in our daily life. Additionally, I've been trying to reflect on appointment of governments, appointment of reshuffling, and so forth. Usually, appointment of government, as Mr. Ferguson said, is a political thing. It is a big thing that you announce, new government. And usually, reshuffles are basically something quietly done. I have been there. You go to the Governor General, you take your oath, and you go back to do your work. Yes, there will be a press conference that will outline the duties, why it was done by the Prime Minister. But I never know that a reshuffle would be a public affair. I don't think there was need for all of that. I think what is important is the leader of government, the Prime Minister, explaining his rationale for what he has done. To go to your question now, right?
Yes, no, you go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
One other thing when what Tobago said with Winston White. Yes, Winston was drafted as a senator into the cabinet to make laws. But within 3-4 years, he was no longer there. So he lost an opportunity to become a lawyer because he went to make laws and we fell out of Great Society and he was kicked out. So sometimes it's better to get your personal life right so that nobody could kick you out. The new reshuffle, yes, Delma, I guess, has played her cards well. For the last two governments. She has performed remarkable as a minister. They have been falling out, and she took a decision. And her decision is paying off for her because, as she has always said, her first priority is to serve the people of a constituency and the people of Grenada. So she would have won the hearts of the Prime Minister. And she has been asked to serve. She has accepted it. You can call it luck if you want, but I think she's capable, and this is why she is there.
Mr. Clement, Delma Thomas's addition to the cabinet of Grenada.
You know, I just shake my head in terms of where we are in terms of the cabinet reshuffle vis-a-vis Delma Thomas. And one can recall that you ask, what is the position of Delma Thomas? And we hear all kind of things. And in my mind, and if I break it down, I believe the movement of Delma Thomas is a survival issue, is an issue of money, bottom line. I remember when I sent back the check for $1,200 to the Parliament of Grenada, one of the first person in my face was Delma Thomas. You're making enough money, what you doing with enough money? I said, Delma, prepare for when you guys are in Parliament, in opposition, because there comes a time when the table will turn. No, you're making enough money. You know, I was shocked year before, 2022, just before Christmas, I got a call from Delma Thomas, and her question to me, how did you leave on $1,200? And that is when I knew, I said, Delma is gone. And so with all this debate I'm hearing now, and to put herself in a lowly position as that, I mean, and this is why for umpteen ages, I told Dr. Mitchell, if you want the best and the brightest to serve, you have to pay the best and the brightest. But again, looking at the whole thing, I mean, was it lucky? Was it well calculated? Was it greed? What was it? And time will tell. And you see, this is why I tell most people involved in politics, whether you're serving in government or not, I always say speak softly, because we Grenadian people have a way of turning the table upside down in the twinkling of an eye. And so again, time will tell, and time will tell very quickly too, because I mean the position that she holds now, to what effect? I mean, she comes almost as a junior minister in health when she served 10 years before within the ministerial complex. I asked the question, and I asked the question again, if NNP had won the last election, would Delma have jumped ship? That's an interesting question. Or would she have stayed on board? You know, and that is critical. That is how we have to think critically. And so maybe Kenny Larsing, who have been all over the place, might say she made a or you could call it a star movement. I do not think so. I think time will not be favorable to Mrs. Thomas.
Time will not be favorable to Mrs. Thomas. That's your position. Now, the opposition, Mr. Clement, is also saying that the ministerial portfolios assigned to Mrs. Thomas is sort of a consolation prize. That the having responsibility for the Mountgay Hospital is not necessarily something that a minister really needs to be overseeing, that can be done through the Ministry of Health in and of itself. Your thoughts on that?
Well, when she served before, remember she was responsible as Minister of Social Development, and she's also served during COVID with responsibility for the
but she had responsibility. She had responsibility for hospital services at the time. Yes,
hospital services. So
Yes.
yes, it is what is it's a lesser position than she had. I mean, I consider her to be very senior because after serving in government for 9+ years, she would have had the know it all. So it was probably a consolation prize. But again, I think in to get Delma on the side, it is not 6-9 now, but it is 10-5. And so now this gives the Prime Minister a lot of room to maneuver with other other MPs that may get out of line. If it was 9-6 or 8-7, what was done to Mr. Ron Redhead would have not been done. Come on now. So now, if probably he gets one other person, let's say he gets another Pablo, you might see other people going to, or if he gets a in here, we might see other people, and now he has more weight and more leverage to discipline other members that he finds out of line.
Or maybe a Peter David coming home to the NDC. It's a joke, folks. It's a joke. It's said in jest. Absolutely, gentlemen. And the other reassignments, we have Mr. Telesford going into health. Health is continues to be a perennial issue. It's an albatross around the necks of the Grenadian people. What are you hoping to see happen there? And assessing the performance of the previous minister, how would you assess the performance of the previous Minister of Health against the backdrop of this new entrant into that ministry? Mr. Lal Singh, I'll start with you on that question.
Well, it's difficult to say what the new entrant will do.
Yes.
But one can analyze what has been taking place in this government, previous government. We have failed when it comes to health. We have failed completely. And I remember saying in 2013, government in Grenada cannot afford to give us proper health care. The people cannot afford to pay for proper health care. So we need to put in place a national health insurance, which will help the government and the people to better put in place all the facilities that we need so as to provide proper health care for our people. And if this new minister really want to make a difference, the government want to make a difference. I know the government has talked about a new hospital, but I think they need to show the competency in equipping what we have at the moment, equipping the hospital, the medical facilities around the island with doctors, nurses, equipment, and so forth. If we really want to get healthcare right, these are the things that we need to do. National health insurance, equipping with personnel, equipment, being able to maintain the equipment. If you can't do that, then we're back to square one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Clement, the previous
Bob.
Minister of Health and the transition to Mr. That's the MP for St. George Southeast, Mr. Telesford, Honorable Telesford. Go ahead.
Well, you have said, and you have said correctly, that health seems to be a millstone around government's neck over and over and over again. And I would agree with Mr. Lal Singh in talking about putting new structure in place as to administer health in Grenada. But with the last Minister of Health, and mind you, I listened to the last budget that was given. I listened to the previous budget that was given. I listened to almost all of the ministers and senators and opposition. Mm-hmm. And
yes,
we have fall short last year. And probably I could speak after the opposition leader now, that the budget for health last year fell short by $27 million. And I sit there and I shook my head and I said, if $27 million in health, you fall short, then what service was not given? What parameters were not taken into consideration? Because for the injection of $27 million into the health facilities, it would go a long way. And if your 2022 budget or 2023 budget fell short by $27 million, that says a lot. And so, yes, it was a colossal failure in terms of the health facility, and it will continue to be. I mean, it doesn't matter who they bring in or under what circumstances, as long as how we treat it. We need a new strategy. We need the new input. And for years, I've been hearing about health insurance, but by itself, every part of the world, health is very expensive. And if we do not have the funds to do it, we could maybe put forward the best budget. But if the budget have to fall short by $27 million, then something is wrong in terms of that ministry or government falls short by that amount. And when that happens, what happens? Services, medication, blood pressure medicine, diabetes medicine, analysis, lab work, everything goes out the window. And so, but our people too must recognize that you also have to pay for what you get. Because if health is that expensive, it means therefore we have to find a way and a means where we could augment government services with what we can afford to. And so our health insurance should be overdue, long overdue.
Absolutely, and perhaps that's one of the issues that the new Minister of Health can address. Of course, and speaking of the new Minister of Health, we have not had much luck with the previous Minister of Health, my good friend, Mr. Jonathan Lacrette, in coming on the Bubb Report. But I trust that now that we have a new Minister of Health, we might be more fortunate to have Mr. Telesford. I see we have the Honorable Gloria Thomas listening to the Bubb Report this morning. Hello, Honorable Thomas. You have never had an issue with coming on the Bubb Report in the past. And for the ministers who have been avoiding this platform, you let them know that we are fair. We are fair but firm, right, Mr. Clement, in the interest of the national community. But folks, what we will do now, we will take a break and we will come back for some closing comments from our esteemed guests. Please.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific Section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't buy that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed. The Bubb Report. We go there. And welcome back, viewers and listeners. And again, we're happy that you can join us. If you have not shared this program, please do so that other folks can get an opportunity to listen to this very interesting discourse. Again, here on the Bubb Report, we aim to ensure that we have diverse perspectives and diverse voices on a range of issues affecting Grenada and the wider Caribbean and its diaspora. Of course, before we get to some closing comments, gentlemen, I just want to get some comments from our viewers and listeners. Anthony DeRiggs is saying, Gentlemen, you are right about health insurance. One bill I had here in the United States in 2017 was over $100,000. Don't get sick. LaQuisha Roberts is saying, Lacrette was a failure in health. I believe Mr. Telesford more. He seems to have good administrative abilities. Brian Grimes is saying, human resources goals. To this day, there is no regularization of workers to stop the mass exodus of workers. And I believe here he's probably referring to the nurses, though I'm subject to correction. The $27 million that Mr. Clement spoke of, the shortfall that you spoke of, Mr. Clement, surely could have been applied there. Again, Ms. Roberts is saying health needs better management, and the healthcare professional needs to be held accountable to their code of ethics. Let's see. Mr. Stephen McDonald is saying, Mr. Clement, do you have any future in Grenadian politics, Mr. Clement? Do you intend to get back into the meat of things politically?
Dr. Bob, is it a question that I should? Okay, yes, it is a question, and yes, one might take a backseat, and in this period of craziness, sometimes you need to stop, analyze. You must analyze and calculate and recalculate, and should one stay out of politics? I mean, maybe they're talking about frontline politics, but I have always served in Grenada. Remember, I started the politics since 1994, 95. And
yes.
So you're almost talking about 30 years. And if it is relevant and there is need for me to serve and I can serve in a capacity and I can contribute, I would ask all Grenadians to contribute. And I think that is one of the problems that we are having. There are people sitting in Grenada that can contribute and refuse to contribute. And so that is why sometimes we get people in position that sometimes do not turn out the way that we want things to turn out. So I will continue to call on people who are willing, who are able, and who they are endowed to serve people. But again, maybe now the package is probably a lot more attractive, that we might find people coming out of the woodworks. But when it comes to the service of country, I do not think anybody should back away under any circumstances. As long as you are able, willing, you will be. And so, yes, I would say under the circumstances, willing and able, yeah, I have served for 30 years already, but that was since from my youth, and 30 years into my youth still. I mean, the question is, should I put on my battle gear and roll out? 2024 would be a very interesting
boots on the ground. Boots on the ground, as boots on the ground, as your kayak compatriot would say.
Trench warfare. Trench warfare.
Okay. All right. Okay. So some closing comments, gentlemen. Mr. Lal Singh, I'll start with you.
Yes, I want to go back to the budget presented by the government. Mr. Tobago just mentioned it. The package for ministers and parliamentarians. This is something that was long overdue, and I believe PM Dickon Mitchell got it right. It is something that Dr. Mitchell has avoided for years, never wanting to make the job of the MP and ministers easy, never wanted to make them look independent. So he denied them. As a matter of fact, like Mr. Clement said, a lot of people have been denied of wanting to come forward to serve the country. When you look at the remuneration handed out to MPs, ministers, it was way below. And that does not encourage anyone to get involved to serve the country. Because in serving, it's costly. It's very, very costly. I remember when I became a parliamentarian in 1984, we had no office whatsoever. There was no staffing. There was nothing. It was just you and you alone to run a constituency and it to be organized. There was nothing. And when you get into the ministry, what you get was little or nothing. You had to make magic. I mean, I did it 2 consecutive terms for St. Patrick West. It is because I used my ability, I used my funds to do it. So I'm pleased that this present government have seen the wisdom in putting a package for the MPs and ministers that will make them comfortable in serving the people properly. There is no reason now for them not to serve the people properly because they have what it takes. So I want to congratulate them for what they have done, and I hope all that have been said from the budget, from the debate, that we can see a difference in Grenada. We need to see a vast difference in terms of healthcare in particular, education. We have a serious problem with our young people leaving school. Our young people are leaving school and they're not even sure what they want to do and what kind of life they can live. They come into the workplace and you have to keep training them day after day. You train them this week, they work for 1 week properly, and then the next week they go back to their old style. This is something that needs to be addressed. And I don't believe it's Grenada alone. It seems to be a generation problem. But we need to address it. How can we prepare our young people for the future? It is a serious problem. Thank you.
And that is something you have always articulated and expressed. And we remembered Mr. Basdeo Panday today, and that's one of the things that Mr. Panday spoke about as well in the last interview I did with him. He's worried about how do we retool our human resource capacity to fit with these 21st century demands? Is our education system really keeping up with the changes that have occurred in our society since the advent of our colonial education systems? And that is something that you also articulate well. Mr. Lalsing, thank you so much. Mr. Clements, sir, over to you for some closing comments.
Well, thank you very much again, Dr. Bob, for having me. And I believe today we are at this inflection point because of the debacle with the media and government per se. But I will encourage the media to be a lot more forceful. I mean, I think the honeymoon with the government now is over, and there is a lot of questions to be asked because since 18 months ago, I am still asking how come it is never raised. Like, for instance, now we have the Prime Minister, and sometimes he's not questioned in the light that he should be questioned. For instance, I'm wondering, we are so strapped for cash in Grenada now that government might crumble under its own weight because government overheads now is higher than it used to be. But yet we have a Prime Minister who refused to enter the Prime Minister's residence, Mount Royal, and is paying between $24,000 to $30,000 a month rent, and nobody question it. Now, I have to say, because I file my taxes, I pay taxes, and these are the monies that are going to pay a $24,000 plus $25,000 a month rent when we have a Prime Minister's residence sitting there, being taken over by Woodans or never entered into? Then where is the accountability where is the media in asking those critical questions?
And that's a very important point you raised, because I believe that the Mount Royal was under renovation, but I'm not too sure if the renovation is complete. And if in fact it is complete, then why has he not moved into the Prime Minister's residence? But yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Clements.
I ask the question: is the renovation even started? Is there any intention? I don't know, Dr. Bob. I mean, we have to pray for our Grenadian people so that at the end of the day, you have to pray for the government too, because I will repeat the words of Jeremiah: if it is well with the government, it will be well with our people. So we need prayers in this country, lots of prayers. And I hope that 2024 people's eyes would be opened up, both opposition and government, to do the right thing by our Grenadian people. Otherwise, I would have to come out again out of the woodworks and be a voice again. And there might be celebration in the streets, you know. And so it is almost upsetting to sit back and try to sit back and let things run as it should run. And if things are going as it should go, you may not hear from me. But if I believe better can be done and worse is continuing, then people like me again would come out and as a voice of reckoning, a voice to be heard. And so a word to the wise. Thank you very much, and I wish you all Godspeed and all God's blessing. My brother,
Well, absolutely, Mr. Clement. And again, hopefully when you come out this time, you would not be chaining yourself to the University of the Breadfruit Tree there in your constituency in Bolio.
You do what is necessary. You do what is necessary. And so all these were history. I mean, come on now. You advocate when it's time to advocate. And you make the parliament more lively, you know? So, yeah. That is what you see is what you get.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Clement. That's Mr. Tobago Clement, viewers and listeners. Absolutely. It was my pleasure, sir. You're always welcome on this platform. Mr. Tobago Clement, the former leader of Her Majesty's opposition at the time, it was Her Majesty, so it was Her Majesty's opposition. He was also a member of the New National Party before he crossed the floor. Now, before we end the program today, LaQuisha Roberts is saying, Dr. Bubb, your program probably needs an adjusted time for airing because this program is so wholesome for us intellectuals. I wonder why the viewership isn't reflecting such. So LaQuisha, I thought I wanted to highlight this comment. First and foremost, thank you for your kind comments. And let me just make the point that I juggle the Bubb Report in addition to my full-time commitments as an associate professor, and I've also taken on additional leadership responsibilities at my place of employment. And as such, sometimes it would be difficult for me to adjust the program time on another day or at another time. But if you do want to see repeats of the program, you're more than welcome to look at it on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is always available, as well as on the Facebook page. But irrespective of how small the audience is, I have to say that I do enjoy having all of you as audience members here because you are the ones who make this program possible, and you are one of our valued listeners. So thank you for continuing to do that. We hope that you will continue to do that in the new year as well. But I would say one final thing. In this social media age, sensationalism and outrage sells. So I assure you, if I was doing a program on some veritable manner of Mowat, that my views would be skyrocketing. If I was doing a program on who breed who take who, and whatever else, I can assure you that people would be tuning in. But that's just the reality of the age in which we live. And of course, thank you again for your comments, Ms. Roberts, as well as Mr. Brian Grimes and all of the viewers, Margaret, and all of the other viewers and listeners who tune in to the program. So thank you again. And of course, on behalf of the hardworking producers of the Bubb Report, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. I'm wishing all of you a happy new year again, and we will see you next week for another installment of the Bubb Report. Take care. Bye-bye.